The NAV console flickered again, the ancient wiring protesting every maneuver Ethan forced out of his freighter. Rust, half-melted panels, and coffee stains mapped the interior like a museum of questionable life choices. Outside, a dying sun cast the moon's cracked surface in copper and gold, its pale ridges sharp against the black void. Ethan leaned forward, muttering at the console as if cursing it into cooperation. "Come on, Patchy. Just hold together for 20 more minutes," he whispered, patting the dashboard where someone, maybe him, maybe the ship's last doomed owner, had scratched "Don't panic" into the metal. Patchy, the freighter's AI, hissed static before drawling in its permanent deadpan. "Your optimism is noted. Statistically, we're more likely to scatter ourselves across this crater than land." "Always a pleasure flying with you," Ethan shot back. Dust plumed under the landing struts as the ship settled, one foot sinking slightly deeper than the rest, giving it a crooked, drunk look. Ethan strapped on his half-broken helmet, oxygen warning blinking orange. A walk on an uncharted moon wasn't in his plans, but mineral scanners had spiked the second he entered orbit, and he wasn't about to let a possible fortune slip through his grease-stained fingers. He stepped into a low, skeletal landscape, cracked rock, jagged spires like fossilized lightning, and the distant remains of what might have been alien structures half buried under dust. The air smelled like cold metal and ancient secrets, though the smell was mostly recycled ship air and faint ozone from his suit's leaky battery pack. His boot scraped over something smooth. He brushed aside the dust, revealing pale metallic plating, its surface etched with glyphs looping like flowing water. Patchy's voice rasped in his ear. "Caution. Unknown technology. Remember last time you touched something shiny? That only exploded a little," Ethan said. 6 hours in an escape pod counts as more than a little. Before he could argue, a shadow rippled across the ground. Reflex made him turn, pulse spiking. A figure stepped from behind a stone arch, slender, armored in matte black plates that shimmered with traces of alien script. A helm covered most of her face, but what drew his eye were the ears, long, delicate, sweeping back like a falcon's wings. She moved closer, each step as measured as a predator. Ethan's mind, half occupied with mild panic, still noted how her silhouette seemed more human than alien. His mouth, unfortunately, worked faster than his survival instinct. "Nice night for a walk," he said. The helmet retracted, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes like polished silver, reflecting the dying sun. Her gaze held none of his awkward humor. "I could kill you," she whispered. The words slid out as if they weighed nothing, yet fell heavy as iron. Her voice was calm, chillingly certain. Ethan swallowed then, perhaps because exhaustion and sarcasm often traveled hand in hand for him, replied, "Sure, but then who'd keep you entertained on this rock?" A breath caught in her throat, so brief it almost wasn't there. Her silver eyes didn't widen, but something in them faltered. "And why would that stay my hand?" "Because if you kill me," he said, his voice dry, "I'll haunt you with terrible jokes. You'll never sleep again." Her ears twitched, just slightly, but enough to see. For a heartbeat, her expression shifted. Curiosity, confusion, then quickly smoothed over by cold purpose. "You think humor is a shield?" she asked, stepping closer until he could see faint scars along the curve of her jaw. "No," he said, "but it makes a fine last meal." For a moment, silence stretched, broken only by the thin wind rattling across broken metal. His helmet HUD kept blinking low oxygen, and Ethan couldn't help adding, "Look, if you're going to kill me, could we at least do it somewhere with more atmosphere?" Literally. Her head tilted slightly, a gesture halfway between amusement and calculation. "You don't fear death?" "Oh, I do," Ethan said. "I'm just too tired to show it properly." The alien woman stared, measuring him the way one might study a puzzle. Then she turned, motioning with a subtle flick of her hand. "Come with me." "Not much of a choice, is it?" She didn't answer. He followed her past the stone arch, stepping over shards of ancient plating half swallowed by the lunar dust. Under the arch, an entrance opened to stairs cut into the rock, lit by a faint blue glow. "Name's Ethan, by the way," he offered. She paused, silver eyes flickering back to him. "Aelira. Nice to meet you, Aelira. Just for clarity, should I still expect murder, or have we upgraded to kidnapping?" Aelira's lips barely twitched. "You talk too much." "I get that a lot." They descended into the moon's depths, blue light glinting off ancient alloy walls etched with symbols neither of them seemed inclined to explain. Dust motes danced like tiny comets in the glow. At the bottom, a wide chamber opened, its ceiling lost in darkness. Broken pillars rose around a sunken dais. Aelira stepped lightly, boots silent on the stone. Ethan stumbled over a cracked tile, catching himself with a muttered curse. "Human clumsiness," she observed, voice cool but softer now, as though testing humor's shape in her mouth. "Hey, it's an art form," Ethan said. "Takes years to perfect falling on your face without dying." She walked to the dais, placing a hand on a tall, monolithic device at its center. Faint symbols flared to life, the hum of alien power vibrating underfoot. "Why am I here, Aelira?" "You're an intruder," she said, her long ears angling back slightly. "My duty was to kill you." "Your words complicated that." "Words can be pesky that way," Ethan said. For the first time, the corner of her mouth curved. Not quite a smile, but something alive. "Perhaps," she murmured. Patchy's voice crackled faintly in Ethan's helmet. "Friendly chat or elaborate execution?" "Still deciding," Ethan muttered back. Above them, the chamber's walls glowed brighter, revealing deeper scars and the remains of machinery older than human memory. Ethan looked at the ancient ruin, then at the alien woman standing beside him. "Guess we're both trespassers here," he said quietly. Her gaze met his again. For a breath, the cold certainty in her eyes seemed to slip, revealing something rawer, more uncertain, and frighteningly human. "You speak too lightly," she whispered. "And you listen more than you admit," he answered. Dust swirled around them, lit by forgotten power. And in the quiet that followed, something fragile, neither trust nor surrender, settled like dust between them, waiting for the next breath to decide what it would become. The ancient chamber hummed around them, low vibrations pulsing underfoot like the heartbeat of something long asleep. Ethan watched Aelira's hand rest on the monolithic device, her fingers tracing symbols with a familiarity that made him wonder how much she truly knew. "So, what is this place?" he asked, voice echoing faintly off the walls. She didn't look at him right away. "Old," she said, as though that were enough. "Thanks, tour guide. Do we get a gift shop at the exit?" Her long ears twitched, betraying a flicker of amusement before she smoothed it away. "These ruins belonged to the Anetheri," she added, softer. "They built many things, and destroyed more." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And you're here guarding their leftovers? Or hiding in them?" Her gaze sharpened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward a narrow corridor branching from the main chamber. "Come. You shouldn't be here alone." "Technically, I shouldn't be here at all," Ethan muttered, following. They moved through the corridor, past cracked walls where light spilled from ancient conduits still stubbornly alive. Dust floated in the pale glow, settling on alien reliefs. Spirals of stars, tall figures with elongated limbs, and strange script looping across every surface. Ethan kept his tone light to keep the silence from tightening around them. "So, do the long ears come standard? Or is that an upgrade package?" Aelira shot him a glance, and for a heartbeat, her eyes warmed. "We're born this way," she said, as if speaking a fact that should be obvious. "They hear what others miss." "Handy," Ethan said. "All I got were bad knees and a sense of humor no one appreciates." She tilted her head. "I appreciate it." "Careful," he warned, smiling. "You'll ruin your terrifying first impression." Aelira didn't smile, but the silence felt lighter. The corridor ended in another chamber, smaller, where half-buried consoles still blinked with unreadable data. Ethan stepped forward, scanning the dusty screens, but Aelira moved ahead of him, her steps precise. "This place belonged to my ancestors," she murmured. "And yet, It rejected me too. You got kicked out of the family crypt? Her eyes narrowed, but not unkindly. Exile, she clarified, for refusing to carry out an order. Ethan let that hang between them, feeling its weight. Must have been quite an order. It was, she said. Then softer. They asked me to destroy a settlement. I refused. He watched her as she spoke, the small movements of her ears revealing more than her face did. Sounds like you made the right choice, he said. Right and wrong are small words, she said, almost to herself. And they cost so much. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but a tremor rumbled through the floor. Dust rained from above. Patchy's voice hissed in his helmet. Seismic activity detected. Structural integrity questionable. Patchy says we're about to be pancake filling, Ethan muttered. Then we should leave, Alira said, but she paused, her gaze fixed on a darkened archway leading deeper underground. Ethan followed her stare. More old secrets? Or danger, she countered. You always this cheerful? You always this reckless? He grinned. Occupational hazard. She studied him for a breath, then moved toward the archway. Stay close. The passage beyond narrowed, the walls pressing in like the ribs of some buried giant. Faint blue lights flickered overhead, casting moving shadows. Their footsteps echoed strangely, louder than they should have. Ethan whispered, Anyone else hear that? Alira's ears angled sharply. Movement. Ahead. They slowed, creeping forward until the corridor opened into a dome-shaped chamber. Ancient machinery lay scattered like broken bones, and in the center, something shifted. A dark shape, metallic limbs glinting under the lights. Is that a robot? Ethan whispered. Alira's voice dropped to a rasp. A sentinel. As if stirred by her words, the sentinel's head rose, two pale lenses igniting with cold light. It unfolded, rising on three jointed legs, old servos whining. A long spine tail clattered behind it, and a thin beam of red light swept across the chamber, stopping on Ethan's chest. Ethan raised his hands. Nice doggy? The sentinel's tail rattled like dry bone. Alira stepped between Ethan and the machine, her own armor plates shifting, drawing energy into her palms. Don't, Ethan said quickly. We can talk to it, right? Ancient tech loves a good riddle. It's designed to kill intruders, she said. Great, Ethan muttered. Patchy ideas? Patchy's tone was dry static. Run. The sentinel's tail snapped forward, striking the ground where Ethan had stood. Dust and shards exploded outward. Ethan stumbled back, cursing. Okay. New plan. Running. They dashed through the chamber, the sentinel's limbs hammering the ground behind them. Ethan ducked under a slicing tail strike that clipped a chunk of stone from the archway. Alira spun, her palms flaring with crackling white energy. She loosed a pulse at the sentinel, staggering it for half a heartbeat. Go! She shouted. Not without you. Ethan shot back, breath ragged. Stubborn human. Learned from the best. They reached the narrow passage again, the sentinel clawing at the walls to force itself through. Sparks rained from the stone as its tail whipped, scoring deep gashes. Ethan turned, fumbling in his belt pack. I've got an idea. It's a bad one, but then do it. He slapped a rusted plasma charge onto the wall, over an exposed conduit humming faintly. The charge beeped, angry and uncertain, like it doubted its own usefulness. Don't blow us up, Ethan pleaded. The sentinel lunged, tail raised. Ethan triggered the charge. A bloom of blue-white energy flared, heat licking his face as the wall crumpled inward. Rubble crashed down, blocking the tunnel. Silence settled, broken only by Ethan's ragged breathing. Alira looked at him, chest rising and falling. That was reckless. You say that like it's news, he managed, chest heaving. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then exhaled. Thank you. He managed a grin, though it felt shaky. Anytime. They stood in the half-lit tunnel, the sentinel trapped behind rubble, the air thick with dust and ancient heat. Still want to kill me? Ethan asked, voice lighter than he felt. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw her mouth soften into something like a real smile. Not today. Well, progress, he said, and for a heartbeat, even the broken world around them seemed a little less dark. Dust still hung in the air like a living thing, drifting in lazy spirals while Ethan leaned against the cracked tunnel wall, catching his breath. Alira moved past him without a word, scanning the collapsed passage they just barely survived. Her long ears twitched as she listened for the sentinels scratching beyond the rubble, but all that came was silence broken by the slow hiss of cooling stone. So, what now? Ethan asked, voice rough but trying for lightness. Do we find another homicidal relic to wake up? Or do we get to pick the tourist route this time? She turned, her silver eyes narrowing at his grin, though the corner of her mouth betrayed a reluctant amusement. Your humor is misplaced. Misplaced? Maybe. Effective? Definitely. You're still not stabbing me, so I count that as a win. She shook her head, faint sparks of alien light tracing the seams in her armor as if the suit itself disapproved. We can't stay here. The structure is unstable. Right? He said, rolling his shoulder to shake off a stubborn ache. And here I thought we'd redecorate. Maybe open a little cafe. Coffee and ancient death traps. Half price on Tuesdays. Patchy buzzed in his ear, tone flat as old steel. Your business plan is terrible. Better than yours, Patchy. Ethan shot back, earning himself another twitch from Alira's ears. They pressed on into darker tunnels where the blue glow of half-dead conduits offered little comfort. Occasionally, Ethan's helmet HUD flared with warnings. Unknown energy readings, radiation pockets, failing oxygen reserves. He ignored them as best he could, keeping his eyes mostly on Alira's back. Her stride stayed sure even in the gloom, the line of her shoulders betraying tension she didn't speak aloud. So, Ethan ventured, stepping carefully over a chunk of broken machinery that looked like it might have once been a weapon. Tell me something about yourself. Something that doesn't involve exile or attempted murder. Alira glanced over her shoulder, the motion almost suspicious. Why? Because this silence is killing me faster than the oxygen leak in my suit, he said. And because if we're stuck together, I'd rather know who's probably saving my life, or ending it, tomorrow. She was silent for a few more paces. Then softly, when I was young, I wanted to be a navigator. I dreamed of mapping the paths between stars no one had yet named. Ethan blinked, surprised by the admission. And now I am a weapon pointed at strangers, she said, and her voice held no anger, only resignation. Well, he said after a breath, your aim could use work. I'm still alive. Her ears twitched again. Perhaps, she allowed, you're harder to kill than most. Or just luckier, Ethan said, trying to keep the mood light. Speaking of which, his boot clinked against something half-buried. He crouched, brushing away dust to reveal an alien device the size of his palm. Its surface was smooth metal, etched with swirling script. Patchy's voice crackled. Unknown device. Probability of explosion. Moderate. You always know how to cheer me up, Patchy, Ethan muttered. Let me see, Alira said, kneeling beside him. Her fingers traced the script, then pressed a recessed panel. The device flared to life, projecting a slow-rotating hologram of the moon above them, scattered with blinking glyphs. Ethan whistled low. That's impressive. A cartographic node, she explained. The Anetheri used them to track ley currents, streams of energy beneath the surface. Ley currents, Ethan echoed. Like space rivers? She paused, as though choosing the closest word in his language. Yes, they power their machines, and sometimes their weapons. He watched the soft glow reflect in her silver eyes. And this node tells us where those currents are? Yes, she said, and it might show us where to find an exit. Or more danger. Well, we've got a talent for that, Ethan said, rising and brushing off dust. Lead the way, Captain Long Ears. She turned, ears flattening briefly. That is not a name. Yet, Ethan teased. Give it time. They moved on, following the map's flickering projections. The tunnels grew stranger. Walls of fused black glass, strange geometric shapes rising from the floor like half-formed thoughts. At one point, Ethan nearly walked into a field of floating shards, each spinning slowly in place, humming with energy. Don't touch them, Elira warned, stopping him with a hand on his arm. He eyed the shards warily. They look like ornaments. Deadly ornaments, but still. Resonance traps, she explained. They react to movement and sound. Fantastic, Ethan muttered. Patchy. Mark this as a void on the tour route. They slipped around the traps, Ethan trying to keep even his breathing quiet, though every scrape of his boots seemed loud enough to wake the whole ruin. Past the traps, the tunnel opened into a broad hall, its ceiling lost in darkness. Here, alien pillars spiraled upward like fossilized tornadoes, and in the center stood a massive sphere, humming softly, floating a meter above the ground. Ethan tilted his head. Okay, I'm voting that we don't poke this one. Elira stepped closer, gaze sharp. This is the heart of the ley network, she murmured. It keeps the currents stable. And if it breaks? She didn't answer, which, as far as Ethan was concerned, was answer enough. We should keep moving, she said, before something else finds us. Agreed, Ethan said, but his curiosity tugged at him. So, navigator, he added as they turned away, do you still map the stars? Even in exile? She hesitated, then, in my mind, I remember every path I've seen, every system, every forgotten moon. He smiled. Then at least you took something with you. She glanced at him, her expression unreadable, but the next words sounded lighter. And you? Why are you here? Terrible decisions. Also a badly timed mineral scan, Ethan said, spreading his hands. Plus, I hear the local company is interesting. Interesting? She repeated. Terrifying, stubborn, possibly murderous. But interesting, he clarified. For once, her laughter, soft, quick, almost surprised, echoed down the ancient hall. Ethan found himself smiling despite everything, and in that fragile sound, the gloom around them felt a shade less heavy. They moved deeper into the ruins, where the light from the floating node barely reached and the air felt colder, as though the ancient stone itself had forgotten warmth. Ethan's helmet HUD kept throwing quiet alerts. Unknown energy readings, temperature drops, radiation spikes, but he shut them off one by one. If the ruins wanted to kill him, worrying wouldn't save him. Elira walked ahead, silent except for the occasional whisper of armor plates shifting over her shoulders. The curve of her long ears tracked every faint echo, every scrape of stone underfoot. Ethan watched her carefully, noting how tension settled along her spine like a coiled wire, and wondered what it felt like to carry danger as easily as breathing. So, he said, because silence made him itch, any chance these ruins have a gift shop? I could use a souvenir. She glanced back, silver eyes catching the faint glow of the node. If they do, it's likely guarded by more sentinels. Perfect, Ethan said. I'll just browse the try not to die aisle. Patchy chimed in his helmet, voice buzzing with faint static. Would you like me to draft your will, Captain? Write something poetic, Ethan said. Maybe add that I died doing what I love. Annoying dangerous women. Elira's ears flicked, the movement betraying amusement she didn't voice. You talk too much, she murmured. And yet you keep listening. Ethan shot back. Ahead, the tunnel sloped downward, revealing a chamber half flooded with a thin, black liquid that shimmered under alien glyphs. Strange metallic petals jutted from the pool's edge, arranged in a spiral pattern like a broken flower. At its center floated a dull orb the size of a human heart, wrapped in drifting tendrils of faint light. Okay, Ethan whispered. That definitely wasn't on the tourist map. Elira's gaze stayed locked on the orb. A memory core, she said softly. It records what was lost. Lost as in ancient civilization wiped out? Ethan asked. Yes, she answered, voice quiet. And sometimes, what they chose to forget. He eyed the oily surface of the pool. Well, I vote we don't take a swim. Agreed, she said, stepping carefully onto the metallic petals. They shifted under her weight but didn't sink. Light as a feather, Ethan muttered, then tried his own luck. The petal creaked, but held, sending a faint ripple through the liquid that caught alien glyphs on the walls, making them dance in reflected light. At the center, the orb's glow pulsed gently, as though sensing their presence. Alira reached out, fingers hovering inches from its surface. The moment her skin passed through the drifting tendrils, images spilled into the air. Fragments of cities suspended in orbit, great living ships shaped like silver leaves, and tall figures with long ears speaking in a tongue Ethan couldn't understand. A Netheri history, she murmured. Some of these places were gone before I was born. And yet here they are, floating like old ghosts, Ethan said. Patchy clicked in Ethan's helmet. Recommend caution. Energy spikes detected. Of course there are, Ethan muttered. Then the images changed. Flames consuming a colony, ships falling in slow spirals from the sky, and finally, a figure armored like Alira, raising a hand that sparked with deadly power. Ethan saw civilians running, felt something catch in his throat. Alira pulled her hand back sharply. The images dissolved into ripples of light, then faded. Her breath sounded louder in the silence that followed. That was why you were exiled, Ethan said softly. She didn't look at him. I refused to become that, she said, voice rough around the edges. Looks like you still haven't, Ethan offered. That counts for something. For what? She asked, almost too quietly. For being better than your past, he said. Her gaze met his, something raw flickering behind silver eyes. Then, as though embarrassed, she stepped away. We should move, she said, before the currents shift. Yes, ma'am, Ethan replied, trying to lighten the moment. Next time, let's just visit a museum. Less chance of being murdered by holograms. They crossed back to solid ground, and the node's projection shifted, highlighting a new path branching from the ruin's heart. Ethan tapped the display. Shortcut to daylight? Alira studied the glyphs. No, she said, but it may lead to a comms relay. We could call for help. Fantastic, Ethan said. I'll settle for any place that doesn't actively want me dead. They moved down the new corridor, where the walls narrowed and black glass veins pulsed faintly under the stone. Occasionally, Ethan brushed against them, and they thrummed like distant thunder. So, you still remember the stars? Ethan said, his voice echoing lightly. Ever think of just running away? Picking a direction and going until no one can find you? I did, she admitted, but I couldn't let go of what I left behind. Family? He asked. Duty, she said. Regret. Well, for the record, Ethan said, I think regret's overrated. You speak as if you have none, she said. Oh, I have loads, Ethan said, but they make terrible travel companions. She almost smiled at that, and for a breath, they walked without words, only the hum of the ruins around them. Ahead, the corridor opened into a circular room. Half-collapsed walls framed an ancient console, its surface flickering with dying light. Alira stepped forward, brushing dust away. Glyphs brightened under her touch, forming a projection. A comms relay tower, its spire cracked but standing. If it still works, Ethan said, we can send a distress signal? Yes, she said, but it might also reveal our position. To your people? Ethan asked. To anyone, she corrected. And not everyone will come to help. Well, if we're stuck between certain death and possible death, Ethan said, I'll take the maybe. Alira nodded, her fingers moving over the console, coaxing light from ancient circuitry. Static filled the air, rising to a low hiss. Patchy's voice rasped. Transmission possible. Power unstable. Better than nothing, Ethan said. Alira glanced at him. What do you wish to say? He hesitated, then leaned closer to the console. Freighter Captain Ethan Holt, he said, voice calm despite the tightness in his chest. Stranded on unidentified moon. Coordinates attached. If anyone hears this, I could use a hand. She added her own words in her native tongue, the syllables sharp and soft in equal measure, carrying a weight he couldn't translate. When they finished, the console's glow dimmed, and silence settled again. So now, Ethan said, we wait. Now, she said, her voice quieter. We see who answers. Ethan let out a slow breath, the irony sinking in. Funny. Started this trip alone, and now, well, still might die, but at least it's crowded. Her ears twitched at that, and for the first time, she didn't hide the small, tired smile that came after. The ruins felt quieter after the message was sent, as if even the stone had stopped holding its breath. Ethan leaned back against a cracked pillar, helmet off now that the chamber's thin atmosphere showed as barely breathable, and let his tired gaze drift toward Alira. She crouched near the console, fingers still hovering over dead glyphs as if hoping for a response they both knew might not come soon, or at all. You know, Ethan said, rubbing grit from his palms. If someone does show up, they're going to ask a lot of awkward questions. Her long ears flicked. Such as, why the guy who was supposed to get rich mining is now hanging out with an exiled alien guardian, he said. Also, why my ship smells like burnt coffee and panic. And what will you tell them? She asked, not quite teasing. I'll tell them I got lost, he said, grin crooked, and found something better than what I came for. She studied him, silver eyes reflecting pale light. You change subjects with humor, but not always to hide. Maybe I just like it, he said. Or maybe I'm afraid of what happens if I stop. She tilted her head, ears angling softly. And what would happen? I'd remember I'm terrified, he admitted. Of dying out here, of no one ever knowing I existed. Normal stuff, really. She moved closer, her armor plates whispering over each other. I would remember, too, she said, voice low, that everything I loved is gone because I refused an order, and that I do not belong anywhere anymore. And yet, Ethan said, voice warming, we're both still here. Neither of us pulled the trigger. Not yet, she said, but her lips curved faintly, softening the words. Patchy's voice rasped from his wrist calm, cutting through the moment. Unknown vessel approaching. Fast. Well, at least it's not boring, Ethan said, rising. Friend or enemy, you think? Prepare for both, Alira answered, stepping forward, hand resting on the hilt of her blade. A slender, gleaming length that seemed almost ceremonial until you saw how naturally it fit against her palm. They climbed back through broken corridors toward the surface, past walls humming with ley energy and old machines whispering to themselves. The ground trembled slightly as the ship entered the atmosphere, a deep, throaty hum echoing through stone. Ethan risked a joke to cut the tension. If this is a rescue party, remind me to complain about the welcome mat. Only if you survive, she shot back, but softer now, almost fond. They emerged onto the cracked plane where Ethan's battered freighter still sat lopsided, Patchy's antenna blinking like an embarrassed apology. Above, the incoming ship came into view. A long, narrow craft with angular lines and engines glowing pale blue, older than most models Ethan had seen but bristling with hidden strength. Alira's breath caught. That's an Anetheri patrol craft, she murmured. From the old fleets. And what do they do with exiles? Ethan asked. Usually, she said, voice tight, finish what exile started. The ship touched down with a hiss of dust. The ramp lowered, revealing figures in black and silver armor, ears like hers but held higher, prouder. At their front stood a taller figure whose gaze pinned Alira like a blade. Alira, the figure called, voice layered by a translator. You have trespassed and brought an outsider into sacred ground. Ethan stepped forward before he could think better of it. Hey, to be fair, I only trespassed a little. And she tried to kill me. Really. Proper effort and everything. The alien leader ignored him. By ancient law, your exile should end in silence. Alira's hand closed on her blade, but Ethan touched her arm lightly. Wait, he whispered. Let me. He faced them, heart hammering. "She saved my life," he said, voice steadier than he felt. "She could have killed me a dozen times and didn't. Whatever crime you think she committed, she's already paid for it every day she spent down there, alone." The leader's eyes flicked to Ethan, expression unreadable. "And why would a human speak for her?" "Because I've met killers," Ethan said. "She isn't one. And because sometimes the people who refuse to do something terrible are the only reason the rest of us are still breathing." Alira's ears lowered slightly, the gesture small but striking. The leader was silent, gaze passing between them, then lifted a hand. "By old law, testimony of an outsider holds no weight," they said. "But by new necessity it does." The words hung there, heavy as stone. Ethan waited, barely breathing. "Your exile is commuted," the leader told Alira. "You will return with us. The outsider will leave." Alira's shoulders tensed. "And if I refuse to leave him?" she asked. "You would share his exile," the leader said simply. "Forever." Ethan looked at her, pulse quickening. "Hey, it's okay," he said, forcing a smile. "Go home. You've done more than enough for me." "I have no home," she whispered. "Not without choice." "Then choose," he said, voice cracking at the edges. "But don't do it for me. Do it for yourself." A long moment passed. Then her blade slid back into its sheath, and she stepped to his side, her long ears angled forward in defiance. "I choose exile," she said. "With him." The leader watched them both, something like resignation passing through their eyes. "So be it," they said, and turned back to the ship. The ramp retracted, engines rising in a swirl of dust before the craft lifted into the sky and vanished into thin cloud. Silence returned, broken only by the whisper of wind over cracked stone. "Well," Ethan said, voice hoarse, "that was dramatic." "Too dramatic," Alira agreed, though her eyes softened. "You know you didn't have to," he said. "I know," she said, "but you were right. It had to be my choice." Ethan let out a long breath. "So, where to now?" "Anywhere," she said. "Everywhere." He grinned. "Now you're speaking my language." They walked toward his battered freighter, where Patchy flickered impatiently on the comm. "So, Captain," she teased, her voice warmer than he'd ever heard. "What now?" "Now?" he said, smile blooming tired but real. "We map the stars no one's named yet. And maybe," he added with a sideways glance, "tell fewer terrible jokes." "Unlikely," she said, laughing softly. They stepped into the freighter side by side, the hatch closing behind them. And as the engines rumbled to life, Ethan let himself feel something he hadn't dared in years. Not hope, exactly, but the quiet promise of something new waiting out there, somewhere between the silence of the stars and the laughter they had yet to share.